Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Perspective Shift podcast. Today we will be talking about a concept that I guess is quietly misunderstood in today's society. Misunderstood not in the sense of a lot of people would think it is, but misunderstood in the sense of people don't know what to make out of it, people don't know how to deal with it, and people don't know why they feel that when it comes. It is nothing else but regret. I'm just going to go ahead and ask you, how would you define regret for yourself?
For me, regret is always tied to the choices in our lives, the decisions that we have to make. So, to bring up an example, let's say you've been studying in university and you finished your degree, and now you're thinking, what am I going to do next? Where am I going to work? Which opportunities do I have now? And you don't know what to do. Have so many choices, and maybe you ask other people for advice and they tell you what would be the best option for you. And so you end up taking a choice, and maybe years in the future, you look back and you get this emotion and sensation, this deep sensation that where is my life going? Did the choice that I made the right thing? Was it really what I wanted? What if I have taken another choice and went on a different path? Would my life have been better? Would I be more happy? It's it's a complicated emotion to explain, to be honest, but in simple words, I would just tie it to the choices in our life and the decisions. And you can take it with any example. It doesn't have to be something like life changing, like finishing university. It could be an argument with your partner or something that happened at work and you said something that you didn't want to say. It could be anything. So,
I feel like you only regret the stuff that you think or you happen to believe that you could have done better, especially when the possibility is there to ask yourself, what if had I done something different? What if I had said something different? What if I had tried more? What if I have or had done this or that? And that's when you start regretting things. And I feel like regrets tells you definitely a lot of stuff about your life and about who you are, because you would not regret the things that you don't really or genuinely care about. You would only regret or have regrets related to matters that you deeply and really genuinely care about from the inside of your heart. And that's why regrets happen, and because you want to go in that direction. So regrets kind of tell you, in my opinion at least, tell you a little bit about who you are and what kind of person you want to be and what aligns with you. It's sort of like what aligns with who you are deep inside and what doesn't align with that.
okay, would you say then that regrets are tied to things that are going against your core values? That maybe there is this deep thing that you want, that you think is important in your life, and maybe you made a decision, you took a choice that went against that, but in the moment you weren't aware of it, and then you realize that at some point, and then you start to feel regret.
Not necessarily, because you could genuinely care about something and it still might not be one of your core values,
Okay.
but you still care about it. And so,
But
core
why
values,
why would you feel the regret then? Like, what could it be? Why would you start to have the feeling, feeling of regret?
so I look at it like core values, like when you breach them, you've got this kind of like backlash on you that I've broken one of my core values, and you would try to maybe better yourself
Yeah.
and try to do better in the future. But regret is just something, just like lingering feeling of what if, what would have, what
So maybe values are a part of it, but it's not.
it is. So like, I would take myself, or like you can take a lot of people as this as an example here of like, say you were. I'm gonna take your example here. You were studying, you finished your studies, and you wanted to work. But then you realized that okay, maybe this is not what I want to do. Maybe I want to do something else, and then you went for something else. And in the future, you were like thinking what your life would have looked like had you done something
Ah.
different.
Mhm.
But that might not be a core value. That's just circumstances and decisions that you've taken at the time based on your values. that determined the path that you walked on, which got you to reconsider that. So the
Okay.
values are a part of the equation,
But it's not the whole thing.
but I wouldn't say you only regret stuff that are related
I
to your
think
values.
when you describe it in this way, it might be related to fear of missing out as well. Like all the things that maybe let's say the same example with university. Maybe you've been studying for 7 years. These are 7 years you're never going to get back. And maybe when you're done with your studies, you realize this isn't really the field that I want to be in. And you start to think, okay, I could have done something else in these 7 years. I could have went on a different career that I would like more. But these are years that you're not going to get back. And then at that point, you kind of missed something you can't get back, time that will never.
I regret usually with fear, but it's also not only fear.
Not necessarily fear.
There's a lot of, it's the equation of regret is a little bit bigger in my opinion. So you've got values, you've got fear, you've got grief, which a lot of people might not get, but
Sure.
grief gets you to regret the things that you should have done differently before the
The things you should have said and never said,
Exactly.
or things that you shouldn't say and said.
exactly. And then you can tie regret else. For example, that's for me. I tie regret with the future
Mhm.
in the sense of like, what do I want to get at the end of my life? And what would the future me, with the more knowledge and the better version of me, would want to do? And I would try to take the regrets from the future that I wouldn't want to have in the future and try
Hey,
to.
this is more like a technique to avoid feeling regret, I would say.
Okay, so now that's something that I guess a lot of people misunderstand. You can never not regret anything in my life, in my opinion. So I'll just take a basic example of something happened in the past, and at the time you didn't regret it, but in the future you've learned something new, your knowledge expanded, and then when you looked at that incident from the past, you notice that, fuck, it was my mistake. I should have, or I could have done differently. And then that's when you regret it. So regret is like, you cannot escape it. It's going to come. Because once you learn more and once you evolve as a human being and you start finding things, maybe getting to know yourself more or knowing the version that you know of yourself currently, the more regrets you're going to have about the past. But when I'm talking about things for the future, it's like, all right, what would the future me would want me to do right now? So in the future, I know that I've tried my best and I don't have regrets based on what I'm capable of and what I know currently. So when the future happens and it comes and I learn something and I realize like, okay, I could have done better there, I can still say to myself at the time, I've actually given it my best and I tried to do it with the utmost power, whatever you want to call it, that I have regrets.
This actually connects to something I was thinking about, that maybe regret, sure, it is a negative feeling, but there is purpose in it. There is a reason why we feel it, and it can actually be something to motivate us to be better people, to do better things, to, just generally be better with other people, and watch out for saying things that we might regret in the future, and think 3 or 4 times before we make a big decision in our life. So I think since we are young, we learn that feeling of regret is kind of nasty and it can get to you, and it's like really strong emotion that you prefer not to feel. So you start to do things in your life, which is like thinking about the future and everything you said, to maybe minimize the feeling of regret. As you said, you can never completely get rid of regret, and I completely agree with that. But we try to minimize it in our life so that the things we are doing are more aligned with who we want to be, whether it's decisions, what we want to do in the future, or how we want to be with people. So yeah, I just think it is maybe just like most other negative emotion, like sadness and grief, they serve a purpose. There is a reason why we feel them, and they are meant to be lessons, things that we learn, so that in the future we can improve and get better.
I don't know if I would I've got a problem with the word negative because it kind of says like it's black and white thing, but I don't really see it as a black and white. Just like any emotion, you feel it for a reason, and then it teaches you something, and then you can use that to move forward in your life.
I see something as negative when it is something that you prefer not to have, not to feel, like pain, like suffering, like all of these negative. But for me, I see it in the sense of the yin and yang, like the positive and the negative, the good and the bad. But at the end of the day, these are all just man-made definitions.
Exactly. You're labeling it. And
Yeah,
I feel like the labeling can. So, like, if you're going to go by your definition of like everything that I don't like or I want to avoid is negative, and everything in this life can be negative.
Yeah, sure.
Because at the end of the day, as human beings, we tend to want to relax.
We prefer to have positive experience.
Exactly. So everything that could get in the way of this is technically something negative, and that's literally everything in this
Yeah,
world.
but I think it's all about changing the mindset that just because something negative doesn't mean you shouldn't feel it, doesn't mean you will always avoid it, because that's not how it works. But I don't know. I think it's hard to go against the labeling itself. I think like I get your point why you don't like the word itself, but from my perspective and why I say it in this way, just about to paint a picture, I guess, like, oh, it's a negative emotion, so most of us perceive it as something that we want to avoid, but eventually we will feel it and we have to deal with it.
I can, for example, also argue that you can actually still regret as something positive. What does that mean?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about.
So like you can for
push you
example,
forward.
Exactly. No, not necessarily only this, but even regrets from the past. But like when you look at yourself in the past about something that you regret, and you're like, fuck, I've actually given it my best. I've actually tried so hard, and I failed, and I tried again and again and again, and I didn't stop. And that's kind of, in my opinion, like a good kind of regret. Like you're regretting it. You're regretting either not sticking with it or not trying harder. But at the same time, you know that you've tried your best at the time. And you know that you did not give up until it was like, okay, there is no chance of me except like letting this go or giving up or whatever. And I feel like that's a good kind of regret. That's a positive regret. You're not regretting the lack of something, but like you're sort of regretting that you've tried so hard for it. But at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, it's like, okay, I've wasted a year of doing this.
I think it really depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on perspective. Like I could see it when it comes to any kind of negative emotion. So like even sadness, there are times when I'm feeling sad, but I like the feeling of, I don't want to get out of the feeling right now. Like it's the same way we like to listen to sad music when we're feeling sad. It's like
the bittersweet.
Exactly. Just because something is negative doesn't mean we should always avoid it and run away from it. Sure, it is our nature to do that, but sometimes it is necessary in our lives so that you're not going to enjoy the positive things, the things that are going to make you relax, if you don't bear with all the things that might be standing in your way, or that they are not an optimal experience.
Like it's all a choice. Like even when we talk about living a regret-free life, I feel like, and we said that you can, but I feel like at the end of the day, you can still kind of choose what regrets you want to have and what kind of sadness you want to have in your life. And then that also empowers you to do things. Like at the end of my life, for example, I don't want to regret not trying. I would rather regret trying too much. You know what I mean? So like you're switching up the regret from a negative, I'm using the term negative myself right now, ironically, but from a negative regret to a more positive regret of like, I've tried and I actually did. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out. So I guess it's like about choosing what regrets you want to have and just looking at yourself in the future and just trying to figure out what would future me would rather regret than not. So like it's like, would you rather regret going on an adventure or would you rather not going on an adventure? It's like just a simple choice.
I do feel like do you think that regret generally are universal? Like, they always say when you are old and you are dying in your bed, a lot of people share common things that they regret, like, oh, I wish I spent more time with my friends and less time working. I wish I said to my mother, I love you more often. Most people who are on their deathbed and they didn't do that in their lives, they tend to regret that. So do you think most regrets are universal among us human beings, or is it more part subjective maybe and part objective? What do you think about that?
The grass is always greener on the other side. But see, that's the quote that a lot of people use, which is the grass is always greener on the other side. So you're always going to want
I like
what
to
you
use it.
don't have. Personally, I prefer the other quote, which is the grass is always greener where you choose to water it. It's a choice. So for example, like, you know, some of my daily choices, as we live in the same apartment, you know, some of my daily choices, and some of them are chosen based on the regrets that I don't want to have when I'm on my deathbed. So, like, for example, it's a must for me to talk every day to my family. It's a must for me every day to do this and this. So when it gets to the end of the line, I won't be like, I wish I had done more of that. I'll be like, okay, like, I've done that to a reasonable amount. And
Is it ever enough though? Like, I feel like there is never enough
that's where
connections.
the subjectivity in it come in. So there's the objective perspective, the objective side of it, which is these are the common. You can look at it
Common
like
regrets.
if you wanna just make it a little bit more statistical, you can just look at it as like, what are the most common regrets in the board, and then you've got, it's almost always the same: relationships, friendships, family, loved ones, vulnerability, emotions, and this and that. So these are like the objective, or maybe, for example, not taking up that job or not approaching that person or whatever it is. And these are like the common ones. So as we know that these are things that most people tend to regret at the end of their lives.
I think that there is a
question-
reason for that.
Exactly. And then the question comes up like, okay, if most people tend to regret that, I'm just going to do quite the opposite of what they did. So at the end of my life, I don't regret that.
But you're still gonna regret something else, maybe.
Probably.
But I think
Probably.
where maybe I differ with you, like, I think these universal regrets are probably the most intense. But then if you're someone who you're always talking to your family, you had good friendships, you had a great relationship, you had great kids, you will still have different regrets, but maybe there won't be this like aching feeling that I just wish that I didn't waste all of these years not talking to my friends, not finding the perfect partner. There is no perfect, but you know what I mean. Like, not spending more time with the people you love in your life. I think these are the most intense type of regrets, but it doesn't mean that we all have exactly the same regrets when we're dying. But I feel like there is a different of intensity level of the feeling you're having, you know?
I think there's a difference as well between whether you were aware of all of this or not. So I don't want to make it sound as if I'm some guy who's on his deathbed right now and he knows exactly what he's going to regret and is taking
Yeah, you
actions,
can never know.
you know. But I look at it like, I know what regret is. I know how it works. To a certain degree, at least. I don't want to make it sound like I know everything that I'm saying. And I try to sort out my actions based on the regrets that I don't want to have in the end of my life. So whatever regrets comes at the end of my life, I will know that I have them because of the choices that I did and the choices that I took and the actions
You're
that
more
I did.
conscious when
I was doing them so I can not have these regrets at the end of my life.
Sure.
Like whatever regrets come at the end of it, I know that these are the regrets that I've got because of the actions that I took, so I don't regret the other things. And in return, that hopefully would reduce or regret from other things. But like we said, you can't have a regret-free life. Regrets always come in one way or another, in a shape or another.
This actually brings me to another question I've been thinking about, you know, since we decided that we want to do this episode. And the more I think about it, it kind of makes more sense that maybe regrets are more of a modern society thing. Like it makes me think about people in the past who, you know, they didn't have as much choices and decisions in their life as we did because they had more important things to do. They were hunting food and surviving the whole time, and they didn't have the luxuries that we have, and these luxuries give us more freedom, and freedom gives us more options and choices. So there are more things to regret. I'm not saying that people back then never had any regrets, but maybe it's a bigger problem in our society.
Let me interrupt you for a second. I don't think that there is more things to regret. I believe that there's more opportunities to regret the stuff that we were going to regret anyways, but just more intense.
There's more what ifs, I guess.
There is exactly. There's more options. There's more what ifs. Like when.
So maybe our imagination is technically just getting wider because of all.
I wouldn't say imagination. It's literally just the fact that we've got unlimited amount of options. So like we can take anything as an example. Just take it as if you're buying a chair. All right, you're buying a chair on Amazon. All right, and you go on Amazon and you look through the chairs that you want to buy, and instead of having like 10 options, you've got millions of options.
Exactly.
And then you end up deciding for one, for whatever the reasons are, and you buy this one, and then you get it, and you don't like it. So in the past, you would have only 9 other options beside the one that you bought. So you're gonna only regret not buying the other 9 options.
Yeah.
Right now, you can compare it to the millions of options that you've got,
Yeah.
and then that's gonna intensify the feeling of regrets that you ended up choosing this chair.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
That applies to everything because we're like more globalized society. We've got more connections with the whole world. We can talk to anyone, everyone, anyone at the same time, anytime.
You are influenced with more people, and you see how
Exactly.
different people live different lives, and you imagine. That's why I like to. Sure, it's not only that, but like you imagine yourself in these different positions. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
like, oh, what if I went to vacation on this beach, or maybe if I went to this forest? Because you already seen people, different experiences who were sharing their own choices that they made in their lives, and you are bombarded with all of these different influences. So
I guess what tends to get forgotten there are 2 things. The first one is that people don't share their regrets online.
that's for sure.
You know what I mean?
Rarely, that's very rare.
The second thing, which I guess is actually the most important thing here, is that be aware not to mix your regrets with others' regrets. Because you're able to see the stories of other people, like you said. You might end up having the regrets that they would have in their lives, and you would assume that they are your regrets right now.
Like you can apply that to many things when it comes to influence. You know how we just take things from other people and assume that they are our things, our values, our regrets, just many things. It's not only tied to regrets, I would say. It's just a big issue in modern society and in social media in general. Like I would say just in general, the effect and influence of modern media is just too big, and you can tie it up to so many things that we actually talk about in this podcast, whether it's emotion, influence, regrets. It's just so many things. And so yeah, I really do think that as you said, maybe sure it's not like more things to regret, but it just
Intensifies.
exactly, it's just more intense, and you feel it more and more, maybe on a daily basis as well, because you're always on your
Probably.
phone, you're seeing different things.
Mhm.
Oh, I wish I did this, I wish I took that, I wish I said this. It's just, but you didn't have these options in the past, so maybe the feeling wasn't so mixed up back then.
Probably. I think like I said, the people still probably regretted stuff in the past, but just like the intensity because of the lack of options was different. And they had, it's not an excuse, but they actually had the circumstances of saying like, okay, I didn't know better, or I didn't have the chances of seeing or knowing better. But in today's society, as you can access anything online,
You have all the information.
even if you want to tell yourself, I didn't know better at the time, it's like, no, you actually could have known better had you just went to Google and just put that
It's
in.
not an excuse, I guess.
Exactly. So that empowers the regret.
But this is the problem. Like, it makes it that it doesn't matter which decisions you're going to make. There are other options that could have been better. But I think the key is to realize that there is no option that is perfect, and you just gotta be more okay with the decisions that you're making. Like, it's the same when you look. Maybe this is a topic for another day when it comes to choosing our partner and the whole modern dating and everything, that we keep looking for the perfect person, the perfect individual, but it's just not possible. You have to compromise something at the end of the day, and your partner is never going to be perfect. Your partner is never going to be perfect, and you need to commit and go along and
That's what I
not
like.
regret. You know,
That's why I mentioned the quote before that I like, which is the grass is greener where you choose to water it. So even though you have an endless amount of options, choices, just decide on something
You need to
and
commit.
just make sure that you water it every day, that you take care of it every day.
Like I see it. It's pretty related to this. Like for me, it's like the podcast we are making and the whole thing with my YouTube channel. Like, sure, maybe there are other things that I could find that maybe eventually I would enjoy more doing, and things that I want to do in the future. But it's all about keeping, like, it's all about sticking with the things that you're doing and committing, and nothing is going to be perfect. And whatever you choose, whatever you pick, there will be hurdles, there will be struggles and hardships and frustrations.
Sure.
I think Mark Manson talks a lot about this, like how you gotta choose your problems. I guess you gotta pick the problems that you have. You're never gonna completely get rid of them. So anything you do will have boredom, will be boring for sometimes, will be enjoyable for sometimes, and nothing is gonna be exactly how you want. So I think realizing that can minimize a lot of regrets in our lives as well.
It can be kind of freeing.
Yeah, like maybe even in friendships or relationships, like you try to be a good friend, you try to be a good partner, and you're always trying your best, and you maybe regret, oh, I wish maybe I could have done better here, maybe I could have. But even then, you're not perfect. You're still gonna do mistakes. You're still gonna be bad things. You can really tie it to so many things, whether in your relationships, your career, your hobbies, anything you're doing in your life. It's kinda about finding the balance and accepting the good with the bad, I guess, the negative with the positive. So it always goes back to the yin and yang in a way.
Just to sum it up, you can always have something to regret, and you can always have something to worry about, and then you can always have this or that option. It's about choosing what you want to regret, realizing the stuff that matter to you, so you take actions on them right now, minimize regret for later on, and just accept the mistakes that you've done, even if you have regrets. Just try your best.
Accept the path that you're on.
Exactly. Just try your best, and then when it comes to that, just remember that you did your best at the time.
Exactly.
And you can build yourself from there on. But I guess that's about it for today's episode, and we will see you next time.